The Kemetic Spiritual System Basics. The Heru. The ancient Kemetic spiritual system has been one of the most misunderstood systems in the world. Much of it was due to ignorance. Another reason was the arrogance of dismissive Western European Egyptologists and their prejudices. Their assumptions about Kemetic spiritual practices have been accepted by most people around the world consciously and subconsciously. The belief that Africans were primitive and incapable of sophisticated ideologies and theologies have been pervasive worldwide. Even today, with much information available at the touch of a fingertip, the belief among people of the African diaspora is that ancient Egyptians and Kemites believed in many gods is still a major hold on the consciousness of the African diaspora. Please hear me on this. The Kemetic Egyptian cosmology is a real philosophy based on organized, systematic, consistent, and coherent principles. Don't believe the hype that Africans were incapable of sophisticated thought. The Abrahamic religions owe their foundations to Africans. In this short screencast, I want to give you some basic ideas on the Kemetic spiritual system that will break down the misinformation that has been passed along by the ignorant and arrogant. Make no mistake that the Kemetic spiritual system is one of the most sophisticated and elegant cosmologies the world has known. One of the biggest myths about ancient Kemet is that they believed in many gods. This is just not true. Their way of thinking is a different paradigm from anything that we have in place in society today. The Kemetic way of thinking is foreign to our general way of thinking in the West, with a preponderance of rational left-brain thinking. They saw the world in analogy, symbolism, and metaphor. In ancient Kemet, everything in the universe came from one source. The only way to know the source is by the effect it produces. In other words, the source is unknowable, but the product from the source is. Everything in the universe is an effect from the original source. Since everything is an effect from the source, then it is symbolic of some aspect of the source. The Kemetians had what we would think of today as a principle-centered perspective. A principle-centered perspective is the ability to recognize that the essence of creation is in different disguises. Where does it all start for the Kemetians? Nun, according to the Kemetians, is an ocean of chaos from which all things emanated and represented ultimate unity. It does not experience itself. This aspect of creation can only be known by the effects it produces. Whatever is created out of Nun is Nun, but in a different form. Therefore, creation is representative or symbolic of that which it originated from. Out of Nun comes nature, the Netters, and all creation. It is unity that is negated by creation. In other words, Nun was undifferentiated and without experience. At the moment of creation, duality was the effect from unity. Unity was no more or negated. The initial creation is an aspect of unity, but no longer the one. Creation is a fraction of the one. You can think of unity as 64 64ths, or 64 over 64. All of creation adds up to 63 64ths according to the Kemetians. For ancient Kemetic or Egyptians, any number could only be a fraction of unity. All numbers were regarded as divisions of unity. The big misunderstanding about Kemet and many gods. First of all, a netter is a principle of nature. Originally, Egyptologists interpreted the symbolic representations of the Heru which is plural for netters, as gods being worshipped by the Kemetians. This ideology was through the prism of a European paradigm. The Neteru were not gods, but universal principles or universal laws. The Neteru do not think or act consciously. They are not big people in the sky. They are universal laws that do not have the ability of themselves to modify the orientation of their behavior. They permeate nature, and we can consciously act on them. Now, there are 3 levels of netters. So we have the meta-universal netters, which are outside the physical and non-physical world. They permeate all of creation. They are principles of creation, often represented with no navels and not engendered. Examples of these are Amen, Ra, and Ptah. Metaphysical netters are the laws of spirit and nature. These laws are what permeate physical and metaphysical creation. They are Ausar, Auset, Set, Nephthys, and Heru. Natural netters are those that are about nature and the natural world. For example, Hapi for the Nile at inundation or the flood, Selkit for childbearing, and Apet for gestation, and etc. There are many more natural netters. Let's break down the idea of the universal netters. And these are some that are really misunderstood. So the first trinity that the Kemetians acknowledged were Amen, Ra, and Ptah. Amen is the acknowledgement of the hidden or mysterious aspect of creation. This, of course, is the Christian amen at the end of prayers. Ra is the animating spirit of all things physical and non-physical. Today we might call it consciousness. It is not a sun god. The sun is simply a representation or symbol of this consciousness, as are all things in the universe. Ptah is the principle of the fall, or the spark of consciousness descending into and trapped in matter. Anything that is physical matter, animate or non-animate. Later, Amen Ra was fused as one netter. Now, the fallacy that has been taught is that these were 3 competing theologies. That is false. It is a misunderstanding of how the Kemetians viewed the Godhead or the divine nature of the All. They are 3 functions of the same thing acknowledged in their different states within creation. This would be analogous to a person that is a father, doctor, and a Little League football coach. They are all the same person, but serving in 3 different functions. So goes the trinity of Amen, Ra, and Ptah. They are not competing theologies, but a clarification of the Godhead and its functions by the Kemetians. Now, at the metaphysical level is the Grand Ennead of Heliopolis. The Grand Ennead of Heliopolis are the principles of the universe and of the natural world. Mythologically, they express how nature came into being and how it works. Symbolically, they express principles that are the essence of creation and life. They express principles of the mind, the body, and soul on a deeper level. Within this group of netters is the foundation of the Christian religion. The Grand Ennead is the one, who is Atum, that became 9. They are all interconnected throughout creation. Again, this is not a competing theology. It is a progression of the Godhead into creation. The Grand Ennead is explaining the different functions of creation, not replacing the trinity of Amen, Ra, and Ptah in any way. So the principles of creation were expressed in a myth. Atum equals the impulse of life and the negation of unity, of none. the beginning of all elements that make the invisible visible. Shu equals air and Tefnut equals humidity. From Atum, the beginning of duality, one that becomes three. Geb equals the principle of earth and Nut the principle of sky. Atum is where the Christian name Adam originated. However, unlike the Christian Adam that was a man, Atum was androgynous. One of the nicknames of Atum was the great he-she. Shu means the void. The void is what separates the earth and sky. Tefnut is humidity or moisture. She is the consort and balancing feminine energy of the masculine Shu. Geb represents the earth and Nut represents the sky. Principles of nature, the metaphysical level. The story of Auset and Ausar explained symbolically and mythologically principles of creation. So the story goes like this. Set was jealous of his brother Ausar. So at some point, Set got a hold of Ausar and then cut him up and basically spread him all over Egypt. Auset, Ausar's wife, went looking for him. And with the help of her sister, she was able to put Ausar back together. Only thing was one piece was missing, the phallus. So Ausar and Auset never consummated their union. So the story goes that Auset fashioned a golden phallus and then impregnated herself. Okay, this was the virgin birth. At this point, they bore a son, which was Heru. This mythological story is really symbolic of nature. In a sense, when Set broke or cut up Ausar, that is the idea of life dying, something dying, and then decomposing or breaking up. Now, just as any cycle of nature, something can die, but then is really the fertilizer for the next round of something that grows. This is essentially when Auset, Mother Nature, basically puts Ausar back together with the help of Nephthys, and then something else is reborn. The golden phallus is represented by the sun because the sun actually helps fertilize nature in a sense. And because the sun never touches the earth, it is a virgin birth. Now this can go a lot deeper into a lot of different areas, but this principle or these principles weave itself through all things. So we're talking about the mind, body, and spirit, but it originated from a agricultural knowledge base. Now, in conclusion, the Neteru are not gods, but principles of nature originally misunderstood by Egyptologists. The Kemetians were monotheistic. They believed in one ultimate Neter that was unknowable and unnamed. In order to truly understand the Kemetian society, you must view it through analogy, symbolism, and metaphor. If you don't get that idea, then you miss a lot of the teachings of the Kemetians. The Kemetian/Egyptian cosmology is a real philosophy based on organized, systematic, consistent, and coherent principles. Do not believe the hype that the Africans were incapable of elegant and sophisticated thought. This system of theology and cosmology is extremely sophisticated, and we are really just now starting to uncover a lot of the ideas because we are able to consciously understand these ideas at a deeper level. There you go. Simple and the very, very basics of the Kemetian spiritual system.